Biblical Shakers, we will read chapters 30 through 34 this week in the book of Job. As we read this book, it is a constant reminder about how we complain when things do not go in our favor. May we learn to be more content in our life, even when things do not seem fair. This week's devotions that are posted for each chapter are indeed wonderful for bringing more meaning to the reading. And if you haven't yet, please check out my blog at biblicalshakers.blogspot.com. Job chapter 30 presents the lamentations of Job, in which he compares his past respect and prosperity to his current affliction and humiliation. This chapter continues the monologue that began in chapter 29 and presents a vivid depiction of Job's fall from glory, underscoring the intensity of his suffering and his perception of God's absence. To suffer extreme loss as Job did was humiliating, but to face abuse at the hands of younger people added insult to injury. The final chapter of Job's monologues, chapter 31, stands as a passionate proclamation of his integrity and virtue in the face of profound suffering. Within its verses, Job lays bare his moral character, detailing the ways in which he has sought to live an upright life. Verses 1 through 12, he lists sins that he had not committed in his heart. Verses 13 through 23, there are sins that he did not commit against his neighbors. And 24 through 34, sins not committed against God. Job has seen himself and is satisfied, but he has not yet seen God. When he does, he will change his opinion of himself and get started on the road to victory. A young man, the fourth person, Elihu, shows up in the 32nd chapter to visit with Job. He was probably a bystander, but introduced a new viewpoint. Until this point, the conversation about Job's sufferings has been dominated by Job and his three friends. However, Elihu, a younger man who has been listening intently, breaks his silence, expressing his anger at Job and his friends, and introduces a new perspective on the issues at hand. He maintained that Job wasn't suffering because of sin. He was sinning because of his suffering. He argued that Job had become arrogant and that suffering is not meant to punish as much as it is meant to correct. In chapter 33, we find Job frustrated again about why he was suffering. Elihu claimed that Job was not listening to God, such as in dreams and visions, maybe through suffering, or by mediating angels. Job knew all this. He did not see that his greatest test must be to trust God's goodness, even though he didn't understand why his life was going in a certain way. We too must learn to trust in God, who is good, and not in the goodness of life. All the men who spoke in this book have elements of truth in their speeches. Unfortunately, the truths are buried under layers of false assumptions and conclusions. Elihu, just as all the rest, listened with his ears and not with his heart, which made his speeches harsh and unkind. It was the same old argument in the final chapter for the week. Job has rebelled against God and ought to confess and get right with God. Next week, God finally answers. Won't you check in and see? Because Biblical Shakers makes reading the Bible way more enjoyable for you. And I pray that the Lord will put a hunger on your heart.